Hello, I'm John Pollock, and this is Fight News Now, the MMA edition. Hello, fight fans. It's John Pollock with you for another edition of Fight News Now. On today's program, you're going to hear exclusive comments from UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones. UFC's Director of Operations Tom Wright will be with us, as well as Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar joining the program. John Ramdine and Robin Black are looking ahead to some future fights on 3 rounds, and Priscilla Caripan will give you a backstage pass to the UFC Fan Expo coming up on the ship. But up first, though, are this week's newsmakers. The last 7 days have been a huge headache for UFC matchmaker Joe Silva, with tons of fights affected by injuries, but none bigger than the main event of UFC 164 on August 31st. Lightweight TJ Grant has suffered a concussion and has been forced off the card, with Anthony Showtime Pettis stepping in to fight champion Benson Henderson in his hometown of Milwaukee in a rematch from their famous December 2010 fight at WEC 53. Next up on the lineup for the UFC is the Fox 8 event that is happening July the 27th in Seattle, Washington. The show is headlined by Demetrius Johnson defending against Jon Moraga for the flyweight title, but it is the welterweight bout between Jake Ellenberger and Rory MacDonald that is getting noticeable buzz as the animosity is building between the two.
After a first-round TKO victory over Nate Marquardt at UFC 158 in March, Jake Ellenberger felt he was one win away from a title shot and just needed an opponent with a big enough name to make it happen. On April 10th, his wish was granted as he was matched up with welterweight heir apparent and champion GSP's protege Rory MacDonald as the co-main event of UFC on Fox 8. After a Facebook post from the champion revealed that his truck had been stolen, Ellenberger admitted his guilt on Twitter and followed up with a series of taunts directed at MacDonald. Finally, Aries fired back, and a full-blown Twitter war erupted. Ellenberger also wasn't sold on all the hype surrounding the BC native.
He's been invented by the media. He's been invented and sold to the fan.
In a matchup between two fighters that have never lacked motivation, this exchange has certainly added fuel to the fire. With a possible title shot on the line, this bout has Fight of the Night written all over it. Will we see the power-punching wrestler with his arm raised in Seattle? Or will it be the man who has known nothing but mixed martial arts his entire fighting life?
Now, Rory MacDonald's training partner George St. Pierre has ruled out Superfights in the past, but light heavyweight Jon Jones has not. Jones recently spoke to us in Toronto with the fallout of Anderson Silva's loss to Chris Weidman, ending that potential fight for the time being with Jones, but he is open if the right scenario comes together.
What I try to do is give the fans what they want, and I know Superfights are going to be important for that, and it's going to be important for my legacy too. But it's something that I feel like I have a lot of time to accomplish. Like I said, I'm 25. And I haven't really taken too much damage. Fighting at light heavyweight is something I could do for the rest of my career, but the super fights and the heavyweight fights is strictly for the fans, and I know it's something that I'm going to need to do.
You're not getting Jones versus Anderson Silva, but no one is complaining about the official announcement of the Chris Weidman-Anderson Silva rematch, including Misha Tate, who provides the tweet of the week, following Dana White's announcement that the rematch is going down at UFC 168 on the same card where Tate will fight Ronda Rousey for the bantamweight title. Last month, it was made official that the next international version of The Ultimate Fighter will be dubbed Tough Nations, pitting a Canadian team coached by Patrick Cote taking on an Australian team coached by Kyle Noak. Auditions are taking place later this year in both Sydney, Australia and Toronto, and we spoke with the UFC's Director of Operations in Canada, Australia and New Zealand, and he provided additional details on the series.
We've got a call for welterweights and middleweights, so 170s and 185s will start on Sunday. September the 22nd here in Toronto. It's actually going to be held at the Western Harbour Castle on that day, and then we'll follow up with the next couple of days after that. Actually, we'll do the Australia tryouts 2 weeks beforehand. In Sydney, they're going to be held at the UFC gym, which opened up in Sydney about 4 or 5 months ago. So exciting times. We think Kyle Noak is great to represent the Australians. He's a terrific welterweight, very well respected. He's been itching for this kind of an opportunity, and Patrick Cote is a really interesting story as well. I mean, Patrick Cote fought Anderson Silva. He's fought at light heavyweight, he's fought at middleweight, now he's going to fight at welterweight. And obviously a very strong Canadian component, very strong Quebec component as well, because the show is going to most likely be shot in Quebec. So there's exciting, all those kinds of elements had to be pulled together before you can make announcements, and we're thrilled about it.
One of the men most synonymous with The Ultimate Fighter is Stephan Bonnar, whose April 9th, 2005 bout with Forrest Griffin was the catalyst behind Bonnar's recent induction into the UFC Hall of Fame. His entrance into the Hall of Fame has been met with notable criticism, with Bonnar retiring with a 15-8 record, including an 8-7 mark inside of the UFC and never winning a UFC title. But Bonnar responded to those taking issue with his inclusion.
Personally, I could give a damn. There's just loads of negativity come with it. It's something you just don't want to look at, you know? You just kind of get sick of that, and you get sick of looking on Twitter because tons of insults pour in. But so no, I'm just gonna try to keep it positive and think about the UFC, the organization, and the fact that Dana, Lorenzo, Frank decided to put me in, and the least I could do is try to represent them well and be loyal.
Spike TV is trying to create their own version of Ultimate Fighter, recently launching Bellator's reality series Fight Master, which has seen numbers increase week over week after 3 episodes. The show features coaches Frank Shamrock, Randy Couture, Greg Jackson, and this man, Joe Warren, who describes the coaching process and how he fit in amongst these luminaries within the industry.
These guys are legends, and they're as good as it gets at the sport. They had a little different mindset, able to take a little more time and be picky and choosy. I had to kind of grab whoever was excited about coming to my team. I was trying to pull them towards me. We had a little sales pitch on every single guy, and I pushed it to the house on most of them. I was thinking, let me see who I can get on my team.
39-year-old retired boxer Ricardo Mayorga may have walked away from boxing following his 2011 loss to Miguel Cotto, but this past May he made his official mixed martial arts debut in a laughable affair where Mayorga came in 20 pounds overweight, and the fight was ruled a no contest from an illegal knee by Mayorga. On July 27th, he will set out for his second fight, and Corey Erdman takes a look at what he has to gain.
This is kind of the perfect opponent for Ricardo Mayorga because Rene Level Martinez, if you don't know, is kind of like the third Miami backyard brawler. There was Kimbo Slice, there was Data 5000, and now Level is kind of like the protege to all 3 of those guys. Mayorga has always been the sideshow. Now, obviously, he could knock any MMA fighter, any human being out. He was a world champion in professional boxing. That said, Mayorga has never really taken his conditioning that seriously. You remember the old boxing press conferences when he'd be up there eating fried chicken on the scale or smoking at press conferences. And if Mayorga comes in there and clowns and gets in his head a little bit and forces him to stand up, I could see Mayorga knocking him out. I'll go with the boxing guy. Since I'm the boxing guy, I'll pick Ricardo Mayorga to win this one as well.
And we heard earlier from Stephan Bonnar, and our correspondent Nikki Reyes also got to speak with fellow Hall of Famer Forrest Griffin following his induction. Griffin began fighting in 2001 up through his retirement last year, winning the UFC light heavyweight title along the way, and took a few minutes to look at how much the sport has grown just over the span of his own fight career.
These kids today, they don't even know what they're wrestling, they're boxing, they're doing it all together seamlessly, There's still an evolution, and you think basketball, football, we're still new in the sport. I mean, this is still maybe like the 70s for basketball, Remember like in the 50s, then they made dunking illegal and the hook shot was developed. Like that's still happening. This is a newer sport, I had an old boxing coach, Doc, used to say the talent goes where the money is. And the heavyweights were always slim. Guys that played football and basketball now might say, hey, I like fighting. You can make just as much money fighting.
And we're joined by John Ramdine. We heard from Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar. Do they get into John Ramdine's MMA Hall of Fame?
Absolutely. I mean, you just have to think about all the eyeballs that saw that first fight between Bonnar and Griffin, and a lot of people started covering the sport and really showing their interest because of what happened at that first the Ultimate Fighter finale. So I think that Stephan Bonnar definitely deserves to be there just based on that fight alone.
Their first fight, of course, going 3 rounds, which is what you and Robin are going to be going. What is coming up next?
Of course, we're talking about Fox 8, the main event, Demetrius Johnson Johnson and Jon Moraga. We're also looking at the welterweight matchup between Rory MacDonald and Jake Ellenberger, a fight that could produce the #1 contender in the welterweight division.
So there you go. Don't go anywhere. John and Robin are up next as Fight News Now continues. Welcome back to Fight News Now. It's John Pollock with you, and it's that time of the week where we welcome in John Ramdeen and Robin Black as they present 3 rounds. And guys, there's a Fox card coming up featuring a welterweight bout where we have one guy that looks like Michael C. Hall against another guy that many say is the Dexter Morgan of MMA.
I mean, you have to love this fight. Jake Ellenberger versus Rory MacDonald, and that's not even the biggest fight on the card. The UFC's Flyweight Championship up for grabs. Demetrius Johnson taking on Jon Moraga. Solid card put together by the UFC. Let's talk about the main event first. Demetrius Johnson, you've mentioned it, quickly becoming one of the pound-for-pound best in the world. Why do you see it that way?
Man, the way this guy moves, you know, it's his lateral movement, his in and out, his footwork, his head movement, and of course that hand speed. This guy can dump hundreds of punches on you in a round if he wants to. He's hard to hit, and it's a really tactical game combined with a very athletic game, and that's when he doesn't want to take you down and explode in with some of the best and most disguised takedowns in the game. Super talented guy, going to be very hard to beat at 125.
Jon Moraga, are you surprised that he gets the title shot? Right now, 2-0 in the UFC, 2 impressive stoppages, riding a good win streak right now, but right now the flyweight division is really developing, and all you have to do right now, it seems, is have a couple of good performances, and you could be finding yourself fighting for a title.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier this week. These guys all know each other really well. There's, you know, the top 9 or 10 in the world are in the UFC, and then there's another dozen outside of that these guys know that are legitimate threats. So they've all studied each other. Some of them have already faced each other. The guy you're facing just fought the guy you fought last. They know who, everybody knows the pecking order. Is Jon Moraga the guy at the top? Well, he gets an opportunity to prove he belongs there against one of the best fighters in the world.
Also, one of the, I think, most fan-friendly fighters in mixed martial arts right now, Robbie Lawler on network television. This guy is tailor-made for TV. He goes out, he's mean, he knocks guys out, he always puts on entertaining shows. Now taking on Bobby Volker, a guy that just likes to move forward. We saw that in his fights with Roger Bowling back in Strikeforce, as well as his fight with Patrick Cote. This could have fight of the night or knockout of the night written all over it.
Yeah, Volker is custom made to fight Robbie Lawler, and he's in this fight. You know, we know Lawler, the hardcores know Lawler a little more because he's been around forever through that Miletich camp and through all of those formative years, but Volker's legit, and Volker can put a hurt on Lawler. I see Lawler landing the big shot. He's got crazy power. I mean, nobody really expected him to knock out Josh Koscheck, but in the world of, you know, some people like this guy and some people hate that guy, the storybook was written nicely.
Well, there was a couple of injuries. Robbie Lawler's original opponent, C.R. Badrazada, forced to withdraw. It's happened with a number of fights on this card, including Eve Edwards, who was supposed to take on Spencer Fisher. Spencer Fisher off the card. Now Eve Edwards in tough as he's forced to take on Darren Cruikshank, a guy that we've seen in the past, a very talented wrestler and a spectacular stand-up fighter. Eve Edwards, a guy that's been around the game for a long, long time. Can he hang with the young lions of the sport right now?
I think he really can. I mean, he's one of the great fighters in the 155-pound division who, although at one time they were saying he was, you know, the uncrowned lightweight champion, through the years since, people tended to forget just how talented this guy really is. But Darren Cruikshank, he calls himself the American superstar. He's the Detroit superstar. You got to be local, man. You got to support your Detroit roots. Darren Cruikshank is an animal. He's one of these, you used the word young lions, and I like it. You know, when you combine a really solid, fundamental, legit wrestling game with a super creative striking kickboxing and karate game, his father's his karate sensei. He's been training since he was a kid. You get a really interesting fighter, a guy who can throw those spinning techniques, hook kicks off the front leg, and all of these, you know, fancy working from that really deep side angled position and not be afraid to get taken down because he's a good wrestler. This is a great, great matchup. I mean, Eve Edwards can win any fight against any 155-pounder in the world. Don't forget about him, but keep an eye on the Detroit superstar.
I think one of the biggest or the highest profile fight on the card outside of the main event, the Flyweight Championship, is the welterweight tussle between Rory MacDonald and Jake Ellenberger. A fantastic matchup, A-plus matchmaking from the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And when you break down this fight stylistically, Jake Ellenberger, probably top 10 best athletes in the 170-pound class. We all know about his wrestling abilities, but can he weather the storm if this fight goes 3 rounds? We've seen that's where he's had a problem. He's been breakable there, and Rory MacDonald is going to be in the type of shape that he's going to be able to push that pace for 3 rounds, and will be more than happy to take this fight into the 3rd round, where he will still be fresh and still be looking for the stoppage.
If this was a 5-round fight, Rory would have to worry about the first 7 minutes, and then it's his fight, 100%. With 3 rounds, Ellenberger, he drives and just, puts 95% out through the entire fight. So yes, later in the fight, he's at risk of slowing down. But Rory is an animal. Rory can go and go and go. He's so well trained in his formative years with David Lee out in Kelowna, BC. He really put together a solid game that by 16, 17 years old when he went to Montreal, this is one of the great athletes in fighting. If they fought this fight 10 times, Rory would win 7 of them, but Ellenberger will look to put him away in the first.
And John, I think that's what it comes down to. Which Jake Ellenberger shows up? Do we see the super athlete who trains with some of the best in the world in California, a guy that believes he can challenge for the UFC welterweight championship? Well, we'll have to find out the answer.
Thank you very much, guys. As always, you can catch more with them every Monday night for 5 rounds, airing at 7 Eastern right here on Fight Network. We're taking a short break. On the other side, Priscilla Caripan explains why there's a sequel to Red, and we'll also go behind the scenes of the UFC Fan Expo. All that as Fight News Now continues. We are back on Fight News Now, and coming up this Saturday afternoon, it just got a lot more entertaining for you because we have live fights coming at you at 4 p.m. Eastern with Cage Warriors 57. It is going to be headlined by former Strikeforce and UFC fighter Paul Semtex Daly, plus Ronnie Mann is going to be competing, and lots more from Liverpool, England. But at this point, we are going to send things over to Priscilla Caripan as she presents The Shift.
Thanks, John. On this week's edition of The Shift, we're going to the Ultimate Fan Expo, and Bruce Willis and a retired CIA crew reunite. But first, we're sending you over to Nikki Reyes in Las Vegas, who gives you the lowdown on this year's UFC Fan Expo.
When it comes to interacting with their fans, nobody does it better than the UFC, and they pride themselves on it. Here at the UFC Fan Expo in Las Vegas, over 35,000 rabid fans will get the chance to meet some of the best MMA fighters in the world and participate in the ultimate fan experience. This mecca for MMA's got a lot to it, so let's get started. Whose autographs are those?
Chuck Liddell, Cat, and Cyborg.
Who's your favorite one that you've met so far?
Cain Velasquez.
Cain Velasquez. How come you like Cain so much?
Because he is Mexican.
This is a big-ass line. What are you guys waiting for?
GSP.
Oh, GSP. It's like winding. How long have you been in line?
Oh, God. We've been here for 2 hours. Yeah, I've probably got another 3 left.
Who are you in line to see?
GSP for my wife. I'm going to hope to call my wife and have him say hello to my wife.
Would your wife leave you for GSP? It's debatable.
You know what? I bet she'd think about it.
So you just met Carlos Condit. What did you say to him when you guys met?
He's a great fighter, has a great personality. It's awesome to meet him today. Not every day you meet people like that.
Who's your favorite fighter?
Wow, the favorite is Cain Velasquez.
You're supposed to say Condit. He's right behind you.
Carlos Condit too. I'm excited,
What brought you back here again this year?
The fighters are so nice, they talk to you, they don't mind spending time and signing your stuff, The fans are number one. They stay in line for 5 hours, man, it's hard, but it's worth it.
The Red Crew is back for part 2, and this time they're in search of a nuclear device. Lead man Bruce Willis gives us the breakdown of the film, and we hear from the rest of the star-studded cast.
Frank, what are you doing here? Kimasabi, I need you. They're coming. I can feel it.
Look, I'm retired, okay? I'm happy. We are happy.
You haven't killed anybody in months.
John Malkovich is out of his mind as this character.
Please tell me that's a stick of dynamite in your pocket.
I'm saving it for emergency.
Marvin's kind of an idiot.
This is kind of an emergency, isn't it?
He gives me romantic advice all through the film.
You have to start to learn to share your feelings, to evolve your relationship, even if it seems uncomfortable at first. I can't imagine Marvin in a relationship of any kind.
You gave her a gun.
It is America, Frank.
After reuniting with longtime partner Marvin Boggs, Frank Moses finds himself forced back into action, having to hunt down a missing nuclear device.
At the height of the Cold War, a megaton device was smuggled into Moscow piece by piece and then reassembled. The scientist was Edward Bailey. He's in an asylum for the criminally insane.
When they meet me, he's completely off his head. Not in a dangerous way, but very extremely eccentric. Come on, Frank, you're going to be kidding me, yeah? Come on, put him up. So I don't get to play these guys often. I'm not since Hannibal Lecter. I always play these uptight, starchy guys. I don't know why, because I'm not like those. But I love this because this is letting me out of the playpen.
As if defusing a nuclear bomb isn't enough, Moses also has to contend with one of the best assassins in the business.
MI6 has just given me a contract to kill you.
She somehow makes it look really sexy and really just fun to watch her stand up and go.
You know, it's important to enjoy life while you still can.
Catherine Zeta-Jones plays my romance from 15, 20 years ago when we all worked together in the CIA.
Katia is Frank's kryptonite.
Hello, Frank. I've missed you.
When she comes into the situation or the scenario, you know trouble is going to ensue.
How are things?
Yeah, Frank, how are things?
I hate her so much.
Is there a human being in the trunk?
That looks like a winner. Well, that's all for the shift this week. Back over to you, John.
Thanks, Priscilla, and that will bring an end to this week's episode. And I want to thank all of our guests that joined us today, including Jon Jones, Tom Wright, Stephan Bonnar, Forrest Griffin, and Joe Warren. Don't forget to catch 5 rounds each and every Monday night at 7 Eastern with John Ramdeen and Robin Black, plus the MMA Report with myself, which comes out every Thursday afternoon at FightNetwork.com. You can subscribe on iTunes. On behalf of John Ramdeen, Robin Black, Priscilla Caripan, and the whole Fight Network crew, I'm John Pollock, and you are now up to date on everything going on in the world of mixed martial arts.
The undisputed